All right, if you're studying IGCSE history, this is a big one. Today, we're going to break down exactly how the Soviet Union took control of Eastern Europe right after World War II. It's a huge topic, so let's get right into it.
So let's just dive right in, because this whole thing starts with a massive question. Think about it. In 1945, these guys, the US, Britain, the Soviets, they're all allies. They've just beaten Hitler together. But fast forward just 3 years to 1948, and they're bitter enemies. What on earth happened?
And this is what happened. This is the end result. A continent literally split down the middle. On one side, you've got the West with the USA. On the other, the East, a whole block of countries controlled by the Soviet Union. To figure out how it got this way so fast, we've got to go right back to 1945, the minute the war was over. Okay, so the Second World War is over, Germany's defeated, but Europe is an absolute wreck. And this created a massive power vacuum, a huge empty space, particularly in Eastern Europe. The big question was, who's going to step in and take charge? Well, the first answer was staring everyone in the face: the Soviet Red Army. They were the ones who pushed the Nazis all the way back to Berlin. And here's the key part: they didn't go home. Millions of Soviet soldiers were still camped out all across Eastern Europe. This gave their leader, Stalin, a huge advantage. Now, this is where it gets really clever. You'd think Stalin would just use his army to take over, right? But he didn't. He did something much smarter, much more subtle. He used this gradual, step-by-step method that got a very famous name: salami tactics. And the name is perfect, really. Think about it. You don't eat a salami in one big bite, right? You slice it, piece by piece. That was Stalin's plan. Get rid of the opposition, slice by slice, so that no single move looked like a massive, aggressive takeover. It was sneaky and honestly pretty brilliant. So how did it actually work? Well, it was a 4-step playbook, really. First, the communists would join a government with lots of other parties. Play nice. Then, step 2, they'd quietly get their hands on the most important jobs, like controlling the police or the army. See where this is going? Step 3, they use that power to get rid of their rivals, arrest them, kick them out of the country, you name it. And the final slice, step 4, hold a fake election to make it all look official. Boom, you've got a one-party communist state that does whatever Moscow says. Okay, so by 1946, people in the West are starting to get nervous. This salami slicing isn't so subtle anymore. And then one of the most famous people in the world gives a speech, and he gives this new reality a name that everyone would remember. That person was, of course, Winston Churchill. He's in the middle of America, of all places. And he comes out with this incredible line. He says, "From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent." An iron curtain. Wow. It was such a powerful image, this idea of a real physical barrier cutting Europe in two. And it stuck. Now, as you can imagine, Stalin did not appreciate that speech. He fired back, calling Churchill a warmonger. And you have to try and see it from his point of view, right? Russia had been invaded from the West time and time again. Napoleon, World War I, and then Hitler, with devastating losses. So Stalin's argument was, hey, I'm not taking over, I'm just creating a buffer zone of friendly countries to make sure that never, ever happens again. And right there, you have the two completely opposite stories that will drive the entire Cold War. So, the secret's out. Everyone knows what's happening. Stalin now moves to make his control official. It wasn't enough to have communist governments in these countries. He needed to make sure they were 100% loyal to Moscow, no exceptions. And his tool for doing this was something called the Common Form, which he set up in 1947. That's short for the Communist Information Bureau. And let's be clear, this was not some friendly club. This was a serious tool for total control. So what did it do? Basically, its job was to get all the communist leaders from Eastern Europe in one room and have Stalin tell them exactly what to do. They all had to follow the same policies, the same rules, no thinking for yourself, and a really big one, he used Common Form to forbid any of them from taking money from the Americans through something called the Marshall Plan. So that begs the question, right? What if you were one of these leaders, a communist, maybe even a war hero, but you didn't want to be Stalin's puppet? What happened if you said no? Well, we got our answer in Yugoslavia. Their leader was a guy named Marshal Tito. Now, Tito was tough. He was a genuine war hero who fought the Nazis himself. And yeah, he was a communist, but he was his own man. He was not about to take orders from Stalin. And Stalin's reaction was brutal. He used his new organization, Cominform, to publicly brand Tito a traitor. He kicked Yugoslavia right out of the Communist Club. The message to every other leader in Eastern Europe could not have been clearer. Step out of line and you're next. Total obedience was the only way to survive. Okay, so this brings us right to the end of the story, the final piece of the puzzle. By now, 1948, pretty much all of Eastern Europe is locked down. But there was one last country holding out, trying to stay democratic. And that country was Czechoslovakia. They'd really tried to make it work, being a bridge between the East and the West, but it wasn't going to happen. In February 1948, with a ton of pressure from Moscow, the local communists just took over. And that was it. The last domino had fallen. And just like that, we're back to our map. In just 3 short years, from 45 to 48, Stalin had done it. His salami tactics, the threat of the Red Army, and the control of Cominform, it all worked. Churchill's Iron Curtain wasn't just a phrase anymore, it was real. The continent was divided. Okay, so for your IGCSE exam, here's the big question you need to be thinking about. How did this really happen? Was it all about the military, the threat of the Red Army, or was it the clever political salami tactics? I mean, you can't have one without the other, right? The army was the muscle, the threat in the background, but it was the political moves that sealed the deal without starting another world war. A really great exam answer is going to be able to argue about which one was more important. So think about it. What's your answer to that?